Unitarian Church of Alton. My name is Reverend Krista Taves, and it is my honor and privilege to serve as the minister of this congregation. My pronouns are she, her. In this congregation, we are people of many ages, many backgrounds, and many beliefs. We are people of diverse orientations, identifications, family structures, and abilities. Our core values are justice, equity, and compassion. We are working for more justice and more love in our own lives and in the world around us. If you are visiting, a special welcome to you. I hope that your time with us will be meaningful and spirit-filled, that you experience being warmly welcomed, and that we will see you again. Please be sure to sign the guest book before you leave. If you're online, if you're watching us through YouTube, leave a little comment. Let us know you're here. We'd love to be in touch with you, and so that we can welcome you in person as well. We open our service with a prelude by our accompanist, Joy Hoft. Thank you, Joy. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice to symbolize that we are entering a sacred space and preparing our hearts and minds for the blessing of beloved community. I invite you to join with me in the chalice lighting words that will be shown up on the screen. We hallow time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Our chalice is also dedicated to the people of Syria and Turkey who have faced a terrible natural disaster. It will take a very, very long time to recover from this. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. I invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer with a prayer called Love Prayer by Reverend Mark Bellatini. Love, you are as strong as a dark blue mountain. Love, you are as fluid as a wide silver river. Love, you are as splendid as a clear night sky. Love, you are as mysterious as a dark forest. Love, you are as wise as enduring friendship. Love, you are true power, not mere distraction. Truth, not deceit. Purpose, not impulse. Poetry, not prose. Sing, not sang. Now more than ever. Now more than tomorrow. But tomorrow more than yesterday. Love, condense yourself into this moment, permeate the silence that joins us in community, so that in the fire of the words to come, the promises of this hour might be sealed in peace. Amen. I invite you to rise as you do for hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Jennifer and I are going to share the children's story today. Come forward. And our story is called Mia and the Big Story by Laura Alari, illustrated by Sue Todd. Are you comfortable with mask on or mask off? Either way is fine. You better for the sound. Yeah. There was once a green valley that lay between two mountains. The valley flowed through a river. On each bank of the river stood a village. As long as anyone could remember, the people of the two villages had been enemies. Strange as it seems, it all began with a couple of stories. In both villages, the people loved to tell stories. They told stories to amuse themselves, to teach their children, and to help themselves remember important things. Most important of all were the wonderful tales they told about the beginning.
In the beginning, said the people of one village, there was no valley at all, just a flat, rocky plain. When the King of Heaven looked down on the earth and saw people wandering around homeless, he decided to give them a place to live. So he sent enormous birds to gather the rocks and pile them into mountains. Between the great ridges, the birds scratched and clawed a channel that filled with rainwater and became the river. Finally, one of the birds led the people to their new homeland. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the King of Heaven.
In the village across the river, a different story was told. Long ago, said the village folks, the Queen of the Earth searched high and low for the perfect people to make their home in the valley. When she found them at last, she sent giant turtles to carry the new settlers up the river on their backs. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the Queen of Earth.
Day after day, year after year, the people of each village told and sang their own stories until they could no longer imagine the beginning of life in the valley any other way. On opposite sides of the river, when the villagers looked across and saw others celebrating a different story of the beginning, they became angry.
That's not how the story goes, they all complained bitterly. This is our valley. It was a gift to us. We belong here. There is no room for the others.
In a little yellow house in one of the villages lived a girl named Mira. Like all the children in her village, Mira had grown up hearing stories about the beginning. She knew them by heart. She knew the valley belonged to her people. She knew the others were enemies. She knew they did not belong, but she was very curious about them.
On fine afternoons, Mira often climbed a tree close to the river and watched the people in the other village. Once or twice, when she was feeling especially bold, she even walked far down the bank to the place where the river was narrow and shallow and waded across.
On the other side, everything was strangely familiar. The trees, the wildflowers, the songs of the birds and insects, the smell of the wind. It was so much like home. Mira looked across the water toward her own village. It felt strange to see it the way the others did.
On one of those secret visits, Mia was getting ready to cross back over the river when she fell and cut her foot on a rock. She had scarcely sat down when she heard the rustle of leaves. A small boy scrambled down from the tree where he had been hiding. "Are you hurt?" the boy asked. "Can I help you?" Mia was too surprised to answer. The boy came closer and held out his hand. "Here," he said, "take my arm. Lean on me until you get back across." Together they waded through the water to the other shore.
"Who are you?"
Mira wanted to know.
"Where did you come from?"
"Where do you think?" the boy answered with a smile. "Do you suppose you are the only one who is curious about the folk on the other side of the river? I watch you the same way you watch us. But you were the first to cross over. That was brave." He looked at Mira admiringly. "I must go now. I hope we meet again." And away he went.
Mira felt jumbled up inside. For the rest of the day, she wondered about the boy. He seemed like an odd piece in a jigsaw puzzle. He was the wrong shape, and she could not make him fit. The others were not supposed to be kind. The others were not supposed to be curious. The others were not supposed to be like her. How could the stories be wrong? There was only one person to whom Mira could bring such a big question.
Old Alfred lived near the river in a stone cottage filled with books. When he was not reading, he was out working in his garden, growing vegetables and herbs from which he made soups, teas, and medicines for the people of the village. Children were welcome to come and pick his raspberries. Old Alfred always offered them homemade cookies and a glass of lavender lemonade. He was wise and kind, and his mind and heart were as open as his front door. That very evening, Mira went to see old Alfred. She found him enjoying a pot of tea in the garden. He welcomed her warmly and offered a cup. When Mira was settled with her tea and cookie, she took a deep breath and said,
"Old Alfred, I need your help. I have a big question, and there is no one else I can ask."
Old Alfred put down his teacup. "A big question, you say? I like big questions. It's been a long time since good one. Tell me about yours." Mira told old Alfred everything about her secret trips to the other side of the river, about the boy she had met, and how he was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Old Alfred listened carefully, and then he asked, "So, what is your big question?" And in a small voice, Mira said,
"Are the stories wrong?"
For a few moments, old Alfred stared silently up into the night sky, and then he said, "Mira, let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger. Not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and heart. But a story can make you smaller if it takes up all the space in your mind and heart. When new people or new ideas come along, there is no room for them. Whenever you hear a story, you must ask yourself, what is this story doing to me? Is it making me bigger or smaller? Our village is dear to me, Mira, but our minds and hearts need to be stretched so we can make room for others. Old Alfred sighed. There will never be peace in this valley until the people in both villages find a story big enough for all of us. Mira felt more mixed up than before.
I don't understand,
She said.
What kind of story could be big enough for everybody?
I have a story to share, replied old Alfred, if you would care to hear it.
I would.
So old Alfred began. In the beginning, there was nothing, yet there was everything. Do you ever collect chestnuts in the fall, Mira? Imagine holding a chestnut in the palm of your hand. Now imagine something even smaller than that little nut containing everything that exists. It was there, but it was not there yet. The way a bright sunflower is and is not inside the striped seed. The way a song is and is not inside the wooden shell of a violin. Then there was light, not ordinary light, like the light of stars or candles in a winter bonfire. This was pure energy. Out of it came unimaginably small bits of matter, the first stuff. Some matter came together and formed stars. Over ages and ages, the stars burned, vast furnaces forging new things deep in their hearts. When the time came for them to die, the stars exploded. All the stuff inside them was scattered into space. It drifted like dandelion seeds on the wind, ready to start something new. From that stardust came everything: clouds and comets, whales and wildebeests, rattlesnakes and redwood trees,
Emus and elephants? Dinosaurs and dragonflies?
and pussy willows and plesiosaurs and seahorses and stars. From that stardust came galaxies and solar systems and a little blue planet called Earth. From that stardust came the mountains and the valley and the river and 2 villages. From that stardust came an old man in his garden and a girl named Mira and a boy who was still a stranger. We all come from the same place and we all are made of the same stuff. We are neighbors on this little planet of ours, sailing through the cosmos. Mira felt like her mind and heart were so full they would burst.
If this story is true,
She cried.
then no one owns the valley and we all belong here. If this story is true, the people across the river are not others, they are like us. If this story is true, we are all connected to each other and to everything else. The river, the trees, the sky, the ocean, the animals. If this story is true, we have wasted too much time being enemies.
Mira began to cry. Old Alfred said gently, Mira, tell me what is in your heart.
What about the stories?
Mira sobbed.
What about the birds who led us to the valley? What about the King of Heaven? What about our gift?
Dear child, answered old Alfred, you asked me a big question. Now I will ask you some. Who dreamed everything when there was nothing? Whose hand held that little chestnut? Who first lit the stars? Who opened the heart of that little boy to be kind to his enemy? Who opened your mind to see him as someone like you? Who made you so wonderfully curious? Mira, you have not lost your gift or the one who gave it. Both are just so much greater than you ever dreamed. Old Alfred handed Mira a large handkerchief to dry her tears. When she was calm, he asked, So, my dear, what do you think of this story? What does it do to you? Mira pictured the face of the boy across the river. She wanted to find him again and learn his name. Maybe they would become friends. Maybe other children would cross the river. Maybe some grown-ups would come too. Mira felt bigger inside.
I like your story.
She replied with a moonlit smile.
I think it's big enough for everyone.
Well then, said old Alfred, perhaps you can share the story with someone else.
I will,
promised Mira, getting up from her chair.
I already know where to start.
I thought you might, smiled old Alfred. Now get yourself home to bed.
But old Alfred,
answered Mira, stretching her arms to take in the whole valley and the sky above.
I already am home.
Then Mira headed out into the starry night. And that is the end of the story. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. We are a caring community where we share the joys that lift our hearts and the sorrows which bring us pain. As part of our worship service, we take time for the expression of joys, concerns, or sorrows. There are stones at the back of the sanctuary and here in front. When the music begins, you are invited to come forward as you wish. Take a stone to represent whatever is in your heart or thoughts and place it in the bowl of water, which represents this beloved community. If you have mobility issues, please raise your hand and we will drop a stone for you. If you're watching from home, you are welcome to place a stone in water. Let us begin. Just 1 second. We need to sing the children out. What is the song that we sing? Okay, how about go now in peace, go now in peace, may the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. And you can put a stone in the water on your way out if you'd like. All right, let's begin. Thank you for that reminder. May the joys and sorrows represented by these stones be held in the crucible of this beloved community, and may we know that we are not alone. Our reading this morning is called Chords of Ripening Wisdom by Reverend Marta Valentin, a UU minister and also a friend. For Audre Lorde, Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, and Rita Nakashima Brock. The first question, at least for today, is how do I construct a theology without a truth-filled history? Audra tells me that I cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. To attempt to uncover who my God is with tools designed to exclude me is to pretend that I am blind while born with perfect sight. It is to forsake self-understanding that I might see like others. Elizabeth tells me to use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. But without a manual, I can spend a lifetime barreling through the front door with a log simply because it is there. Yet I know that same log can only break down back doors to ensure my survival. No more. In search of wholeness, I wonder if the answer is to use new tools to create a new house. Or do we get rid of the house by getting rid of the tools? It is clear that the master must go, but should a mistress move in? My answer lies in Rita's tribal consciousness of self-understanding, survival, wholeness. In creating, building, discovering, out of this world's cacophonous madness, I can be guided through a self-governing tribe of voices that crescendo into chords of ripening wisdom, each with their own melody. I can have a center, a flexible observer who can listen beyond hearing, reflect beyond seeing, choose beyond settling, and in this way, constantly reconstruct meaning. Thus ends our reading. And our meditative hymn is number 1023, Building Bridges. One of the core words in our reading, and one of the core words in Unitarian Universalism, is the word wholeness. We yearn to be spiritually whole, whole in our minds and hearts, whole in our bodies, whole in our relationships. And we also yearn for community wholeness, a sense that everything is in balance, our relationships, humanity itself, the earth, our economic systems, political systems, the place of faith, our private and public lives, and I could go on and on. We search for that wholeness in the big stories that tell us who we are and where we belong. Another theological term that's very important in Unitarian Universalism is that of the revelation is continuous, or that revelation is not sealed. It's not held in one book or in one person's legacy, in one institution, in one God or higher power. Revelation doesn't ever stop. And this means that our big stories don't stop evolving. Otherwise, they become small stories that can't hold what real people are living in the real world. Small stories keep us from that yearning, from expressing that yearning for wholeness. So here's an example of two different big stories that are also small stories. And it's a story of two different nations. So here in the United States, when we think about the War of Independence, what does it bring to mind? In school, we learned the story of brave people who wanted freedom from an oppressive monarch and who were done being lowly colonists. They wanted to be autonomous, to make decisions for themselves, govern themselves without interference, and they were willing to die for it. Families who can trace an ancestor back to the Revolution often express great pride that they would come from such an illustrious big story. But then there were those who didn't want to join that dream, who wanted to stay with Great Britain. They may have even joined the British Army, and many left when independence was won. What does the American story call these people? What were they called? Traitors, right? They were called traitors to the story of America. They didn't want to join the American story. Do you know what those traitors were called in Canada, where many of them fled to? One story of Canada is that we remained faithful to Great Britain. Those who refused to join the American story, those who chose to remain inside the story of Great Britain, we call them loyalists. Loyalists. And the loyalists settled mostly in Ontario, the province that I'm from, so I was surrounded by families who descended from the loyalists and were extremely proud of it. In our culture, they are heroes with their own official holiday. These are two different big stories. The stories of a people who fought for their freedom, the story of a people who remained faithful. And neither story is big enough to hold both countries, and honestly, neither story is big enough to hold its own country anymore either. But these are big stories that we have told to ourselves. And there are certainly ways now, several hundred years later, that these two countries, we share stories that have been revealed over time, right? Because revelation is continuous. We're now peaceful neighbors. We're both democracies. We share a language. We watch the same movies and television. We've both been deeply shaped by globalization and so much more. But still, some of our big stories don't fit together. And for each side, too much that is treasured would have to be given up to blend those stories entirely. In our wisdom story today, we heard about two other big stories that weren't big enough for the people on both sides of the river. And in the girl Mia, we have this microcosm of human feelings as she dares to step into the land of another story, dares to question her story, feels tremendous grief over her beloved story as she realizes it is too small, and then steps into a newer, bigger story and a new, more whole life, embracing the revelation that life has evolved around them. Unitarian Universalism is living a similar story right now. We are looking at the stories that we have believed about ourselves, looking at what has been revealed about our faith tradition and about ourselves in the 21st century, and asking whether the story we've told ourselves for decades, even centuries, is big enough for all of us to thrive and be nourished. One of the stories we are looking at is our beloved principles and sources. The ones at the beginning of the Gray Hymnal, the ones that we've recited so many times, that are often shared in every message or somehow reflected in every service, that are embedded in our children's religious education, our beloved principles and sources. We are asking whether they are still big enough to hold who we are. And this is a delicate but powerful process, because for many of us, the principles and sources are the center of our faith. They have become almost creedal. It's what it means to us to be Unitarian Universalist. So this process we're on is tender, with lots of feelings going on. And I know you've got a handout, but I'm going to read through it later in the sermon, so you don't have to worry about catching up. It's all going to be there for you. So 3 super big things have happened in the last decade that revealed the need to reconsider whether our principles and sources are still a big enough story to hold all of us. The first super big thing was the murder of Michael Brown, whose tragic ending became the spark that lit the Black Lives Matter movement, which has become the 3rd civil rights movement in this country. It has changed the landscape of our country with growing voices of all races organizing to end the legacy of slavery and systemic racism that still stains this country. The second super big thing is the backlash to the 3rd civil rights movement, resulting in the election of Donald Trump to the presidency in 2017. Those were extremely hard years for many of us because so much of what he did violated our deepest convictions. Trump opened the door wide to a renewed, reactionary, white Christian nationalism, nourished by racial grievance and resentment, and a story that wants to small up this country. And white Christian nationalists are doing everything they can, including dismantling our democracy, to stop the shift of power as our country becomes less white, more pluralist, and culturally more liberal and open. The third super big thing is that this unrest led to a time of soul searching within Unitarian Universalism. Because when all this happened, we desperately wanted to step up our game to respond to the hatred and division stoked by white Christian nationalism. But people of color and indigenous and queer Unitarian Universalists and many others said, hold on, hold on. Yes, we need to do something, but we have our own work to do because we are not the welcoming religion that we say we are. And if we don't do that work, we won't make the difference we want to make in our time. Our faith, they said, wasn't big enough. Our story wasn't big enough. Too many people had to give up a part of who they are to join Unitarian Universalism. And that's not what we say we are. We say we welcome everyone. We say we embrace diversity. But in many ways, we haven't. If we as a whole want to be the good guys, we have to clean up our house, which is deeply shaped by white middle-class expectations and understandings, which hurts not only the people who are often pushed to the margins, it also hurts those who get to live in Unitarian Universalism more comfortably, because it holds us back from the wholeness that all of us are yearning for. In the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the section where the principles and purposes appear must be reviewed every 10 years to see if they are still a big enough story. Because you know that conviction we have that the revelation is continuous. We built that right into our core documents. We expect things to change and to evolve, and we expect ourselves to evolve with them, or we will no longer be relevant. We will no longer be a living tradition. We will be a stagnant, dying tradition. Did you know that the principles and purposes have only existed since 1985? They replaced the principles and sources approved in 1961 when the Unitarians and Universalists merged. The 1961 principles became too small because of the women's movement, the environmental movement, the peace movement, and the anti-war movement. So there was a tremendous surge of energy from within our association to rewrite those principles and purposes and bring them in line with who we were evolving into and how the world was changing. And it was also a very tender process because they felt about the 1961 principles, many folks, the same way many of us feel about the 1985 principles and sources, that they're the center. So today we have the third civil rights movement, the growing power of white Christian nationalism. And once again, the call from within our faith to clean up our house. And we have the responsibility to assess our principles and purposes, to remain faithful to who we proclaim ourselves to be. And that deep yearning for wholeness is as so much changes around us, much of which feels destabilizing and overwhelming. It's a hard time to be in our country right now. And we want to be the best we can be to respond to those challenges with love. So in 2020, General Assembly delegates voted to set up a commission to rewrite Article 2. That's where the principles and sources live. They asked the commission not to start with the principles and sources and amend them, but to incorporate them and start with a whole new model. So in other words, new tools for a new master's house, but bringing forward the old tools and reconfiguring them so that they retain their power and beauty. The commission spent the last 2 years talking to thousands of people, and they have rewritten our principles and sources. They've even changed the name. They are now our values and our covenant. Because what many of us were saying is that there's values embedded in our principles, but they're not right there. We have to drag them out. Let's make the values our primary focus and then live our principles through those values. And now the revision has been released, and it will be debated at a gathering of delegates in May, where revisions can be put forward and voted on, and then at General Assembly in June, where we will vote on whether to recommend the revision for a final vote at General Assembly, which will require a supermajority to pass. So I want to show you the draft division. You've got it there, but I've also got it up here. And remember, it is a draft. That means it is still in process, and it could change a lot between now and 2024. And because it's such a big change, the commission has asked us to approach this revision in 3 different steps with 3 readings. At the first reading, listen with our hearts. Without judgments, without decision-making, with our hearts. Then the second time, with our questions and our curious and connecting brains. And only at a third reading, begin to consider what we like and what changes we would recommend. And this helps us model a generous process with each other. So today, let's assume it is our first read and that we are listening first and foremost with our hearts, which means being in a place of love and openness. So here goes. Let us approach these values and covenants first with our hearts. We need the graphic with the love in the center and the 3, that one, yes. Yeah, that's where we're going to start. All right, so as you can see, these are our 7 proposed values, which have been distilled from our principles and sources and the ways that we have seen revelation in the, 40 years since the last revision. Love is the center of our faith. And this has been happening. I mean, look at what our social justice motto is, siding with love, right? Love is a center. We say love always wins. We call ourselves to come from all that we do from a place of love. So let's put it in the center, which is where it always has been, but now we're being explicit about it. Love. And then there's all these values around it. Interdependence is at the top instead of at the bottom, like it is in our current principles. I've always thought that our 7th principle should be first. Now it is, actually. Followed by justice, generosity, pluralism, transformation, and equity. These were already all there. They're just being raised into a place of prominence now. So now we can go through each section and what is written about them. And it's a little long, and no doubt it's going to be written in all kinds of different ways once it's passed, but they really wanted to make sure that they got it right. And this is based on feedback from like thousands of people. All right, so we're going to go at, so let's move on to the slide with the text, as you use, we covenant. So this is the beginning. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. So you can see that our sources are embedded in here, our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage. Let's move to the next one on love. Love is the power that holds us and is at the center of our shared values. And there's always an action that accompanies each value. So then the next sentence is the action. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Then we have interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. So the seventh principle is embedded in this value. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Sound familiar? It's another principle. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Next is justice. And this reflects the eighth principle, which had been proposed, which many congregations have approved. I'm not sure that we have, no congregations in St. Louis have done the eighth principle yet, but it's embedded here. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions. There's another one of our principles embedded in that one. Transformation. And here's that revelation is continuous thing. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And finally, equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. There's our first principle. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. So that's it. We're going to return to our graphic. That's the proposed revision. It's only part of it. There's the whole section 2, which I'm going to encourage you to read. You can find it on the web after the service. But this is the part that's for specifically our values and our covenants. And in this new version, principles are replaced by value, and each value is informed by a covenant or a sacred promise that we make to each other about how we will together live that value. I couldn't help notice how often our current principles are embedded within the values and covenants. In fact, every one of them is, sometimes with the same language we use now. To me, that felt comforting. But it is very different. And there are many across our country who, like Mia, after she returned from the other village, are really struggling with what it would mean to make our story bigger like this. Just like she cried, wondering whether her story was true anymore, there are people who are in some pain. We are being tested by our conviction that revelation is continuous. But one thing will remain the same, and that is that love is the center of our faith. Our current principles and sources implied this all over the place, and now it is explicitly front and center. Love is at the center of everything we do. Love for ourselves, love for our people and our communities, love for our country, love for the wide world, love for the environment, love for all that is life. And these values and covenants clarify how powerful love is and what our love can look like in a bigger story. And that's what I want us to hold on to this morning. Love is the center, and love is the story. Now, this isn't the last time we'll give time to these covenants and values. In fact, Reverend Claudia is going to do her take on them next week. And 2 Sundays from now, after worship, we'll gather together for a conversation about them. We'll start with our responses from the heart, then move on to our curiosities, and then our questions and thoughts. And I would strongly encourage you to read the entire Article 2 report. This is just a few pages of it, and the link will be in this coming week's newsletter. And it's also just really easy to find in a Google search. It includes all the history, the people on the commission, how they did their work, and why they made the choices they did. And it really helped me to understand this in a broader way. So in the days to come, let us keep our hearts and minds open and let us love one another. And I close with the words of Reverend Marta Valentin from our reading. Out of this world's cacophonous madness, I can be guided through a self-governing tribe of voices that crescendo into chords of ripening wisdom, each with their own melody. I can have a center, a flexible observer who can listen beyond hearing, reflect beyond seeing, choose beyond settling, and in this way, constantly reconstruct meaning. Thank you, and amen. I invite you to rise for our closing hymn, The Fire of Commitment. Some of us know this better than others, so if you do know it, sing it loud. So one of the values in the proposed revision is that of generosity. And this congregation has been sustained by centuries of generosity. It is one of the ways that we live our ministry and live our vision. So let us be a generous people, and let us take this morning's offering. Let us bless this offering with this prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. So, announcements. I have one, and that is that the talent show is in a little less than 2 weeks. And I see how many of you have signed up. Yay! That's fabulous. And plus people who have reached out to me in person, we have got quite a show for you. You don't want to miss this show because, Alton's got talent. So if you would like to be in the talent show and haven't signed up yet, please do so on the sheet. Someone will take a photo of it next Sunday to make sure I have the most up-to-date list. And I will tell you that it's going to be slightly modeled according to The Voice. So we have judges, but the real mode is like affirmation and praise and, oh my gosh, you are so awesome. Okay? But we're going to have some fun with that. We're just going to have a lot of fun. Is there anything else that we need to know about that date? Are we having food?
I think people were going to bring their own.
People are going to bring snacks. Okay.
Their own snacks.
Bring your own snacks. We'll probably have beverages. So it's going to be a fun night.
Always
Coffee. Right.
There's no other announcement to pick up. Other than we have a meeting at 11:15, so
Yep.
go grab some snacks and come on back
Yeah.
here and everything else.
Yeah. Because in our bylaws, we have a mid-year meeting. So speaking of bylaws and how important they are, also this coming week is the next session of the UU Crash Course series, Just Enough Information to Make You Dangerous. And it's on Wednesday evening on Zoom. And it is on UU Theology. So UU Theology in like an hour and 15 minutes. Wow. It can be done. Just enough to make you dangerous. So if you're not signed up and you'd like to join, just send me an email. I'll put you on the reminder list so that you get the Zoom information. Is there anything else that we need to say before we close our time together? All right, we have some closing words by Ma Teresa Tet Gustillo Gallardo. Truth manifests itself with its own force. Let us ride on the power of its revelation with a heart ready to receive, to forgive, and to learn. Please join me in extinguishing our chalice with these words. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. So we're having a little break before we come back to our meeting.
We'll be back here in 15 minutes.
15 minutes, folks. All right. Thank you for coming today.